This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into this week. A wild week for Browns fans. Let's get into it, man. Let's get into it. First question comes from Jay Henson, who says, Q, did you learn about the 9 QBR before or after you did the All-22 review? I got from your impression, your All-22 assessment, that the play was pretty bad, but now it's super bad. No. So what happens with all 22 film breakdowns is I do them when they come out on Tuesday so I can get it out. Unfortunately, with the nature of YouTube, the all 22 stuff, people don't really have an interest in watching it after Tuesday. So you got to get it out as soon as possible. But just because I released a video on the all 22 does not mean I don't continue to evaluate the all 22, because that's important for evaluating the players. So it's a combination of deeper scrutiny on the all 22 as the week goes on. You see stuff like a 9 QBR, which did get balanced by a decent PFF grade. And when I say decent PFF grade, it was a 60 PFF grade. So PFF doesn't think he was as bad as he was with QBR, but keep in mind, a 60 is still not a good grade, but that's in a regular range of bad. And then all the news comes out. You start to think about what led to that performance. I don't think it was a physical ailment that led to that performance. I do believe that he played that bad because he was distracted mentally. And you have to ask yourself, like, is this going to be something that continues? Another thing that adds on top of it, right? Because it's not just the 9 QBR that makes my evaluation. It's the film breakdown. It's the advanced numbers surrounding it. It's the traditional stats that surround it, and it's more evaluation of the film breakdown. So, or the all 22. So it's not just that goes into it, but all of that kind of goes into a ball, and then you compare the numbers from other quarterback performances as you go through the week, right? I compared Deshaun Watson's quarterback performance as far as first downs to like Johnny Manziel or Baker Mayfield. The one game he had a 10.5 QBR versus the Detroit Lions. And you start to notice that that game was worse than this one. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It wasn't just a normal bad game. It was a pretty bad game. And the only reason it feels normal is another thing to think about. The only reason it feels normal to Browns fans is because, unfortunately, Deshaun Watson has dropped one of these games every year. So some of us has just gotten numb to it. All of those things factor into an unacceptable performance. Going 3 and out or worse 10 times out of 14. I don't even care if your QBR was decent. That's unacceptable for everybody involved with the offense, including the coaches and Deshaun Watson. So no, it's not just the 9 QBR that makes this game bad. It's everything else that surrounds it. And the 9 QBR is just a way to be able to communicate that point effectively to people who aren't looking at EPA per play every day, or who aren't going to understand what is and isn't going wrong at the quarterback position from a film breakdown purposes, because they don't do this full time, right? They do other things full time, and you need a better way to communicate that to a larger audience. And the QBR is an effective way to communicate that, because you can compare it to other performances throughout the day. That's why the QBR has been such an effective communications tool to kind of push out, hey, if I think the film matches that, then the QBR is effective. So that's kind of, it's all encompassing, but it's why I feel like that game was as bad as it was. So thank you for the question, and thank you for allowing me to clarify my process. De Niro says, could the Dolphins call DTR for Jameis after what happened to Tua, and would you consider it? Hey, bro, we not at the point to be trading any quarterbacks unless they want. Well, I ain't gonna go that far yet, but we're not at the point to where we could trade a quarterback right now, because we're not so sure about our starting situation. So, they got questions, we got questions. So that means we ain't moving. Next question comes from Terry, who says, do you think the Browns should require or heavily encourage Denzel Ward to wear a guardian cap during games after seeing Tua get hit with another concussion against the Bills. Wondering if it's worth how awkward it looks. That's the one thing I do want to be careful about, because it is there because people think it could reduce concussions. Now, the reason the NFL is doing this trial right now with the guardian caps is so they can get more data. Right now, we don't know if the guardian caps reduce concussions. We just know that somebody thinks that they will, right? Based on science, it's a strong hypothesis that they feel like those guardian caps will reduce concussions in the trenches, right? Like that's the main area. So running backs, it makes sense to wear the guardian caps, at least from what you hear from the founders. And then defensive linemen and offensive linemen and anybody who's going to be on the trenches, it makes sense for them to wear a guardian cap. I don't know if the guardian caps were created to prevent the kind of concussions that can be created because of where Denzel Ward plays on the field. So I don't know if it's effective. And then there are questions of like, hey, having that extra weight on your head when you're as light as Denzel Ward is that something that's going to actually make you more prone to a concussion because it weighs down and puts more pressure on your head and neck area, given that you're not going through those small collisions helmet to helmet like defensive linemen and running backs are. So I'll be hesitant to just say he needs to wear the guardian cap because we just don't know much about what the guardian cap is and is not useful for, if it even is useful to begin with, because this is a very new thing that the NFL is trying out and there hasn't been a ton of studies done with it. I think this is why they're allowing players to wear it, so they can get some data behind these guardian caps and see if it differentiates from what the norm is with concussions. So I'm hesitant to recommend it because we don't know the pros and cons of it yet, and the use case of it that's been promoted by its creator does not match Denzel Ward, unfortunately. And I think Denzel has even talked about it himself. The things that would help Denzel is a change in helmet, more than likely. Like there's more research in that. And he switched to a helmet that is supposed to help reduce concussions amongst players in his specific position set. So I don't think it's the guardian cap as a end all be all for every position. But we'll see. I think the NFL wants more data. I think that's what we're going to get, and we're not going to know the answer to that till a couple years. Terry, thank you for the question. Retro says this: in your opinion, how likely is it that Deshaun Watson gets hit by the league? If he does get suspended and we part ways, how do you expect us to handle the room in 2025? So it's a two-part question. How likely do I feel like it is that Deshaun Watson gets suspended? Don't know enough about the case to feel good about him either getting suspended or not getting suspended. I think we're just going to have to wait on that. Anybody that's telling you they know for sure doesn't. Like, I don't think anybody knows. I don't think even the Cleveland Browns know. We'll know a lot more in a couple weeks, right? If the NFL interviews his accuser and they are aggressive after that about a suspension, then yeah, it's probably happening. But if they interview the accuser and you don't really hear much for a while, then, you know, just one of those situations where it's not really useful to predict and it's just going to have to be a wait and see thing. But it's definitely on the table, right? Unfortunately for Deshaun Watson. Kyle says this: there's been some local radio talk about liquidating the team in the event that Deshaun Watson gets suspended and voiding his contract. Do you feel like this would be a smart move considering the AFC landscape, or too soon to jump ship? You wouldn't liquidate. You wouldn't liquidate. You would move on from some guys for sure, but I think that's happening whether Deshaun Watson is on this team in 2025 or not. And let me go back and actually answer the second part of that question too, because I think this kind of gets into it. So what would the Browns do if Deshaun Watson wasn't on this team in 2025? Retro Gaming asked it, and so did Kyle. So what would the Browns do, in my opinion, if Deshaun Watson gets suspended and they cut ties? What would they do in 2025? Well, it really depends on what happens with the rest of 2024. They're probably going to put Jameis out there, right? If that goes well and you get like a Geno Smith style renaissance from Jameis Winston, which is possible under Kevin Stefanski, keep in mind, Kevin has had a top 10 offense with Jacoby Brissett. So if that happens with Jameis Winston and you get a little bit of a renaissance, you'll probably run with Jameis for a couple of years, right? You got him under contract for 2 years. You probably run with him as your starter. If you get the Deshaun Watson contract off the books, that opens the door for maybe even extending Jameis to a Geno Smith style extension and having him be the guy here while you look for a younger guy to take the reins in the draft and you kind of just wait for your moment. In the scenario that Jameis does play here, but he doesn't play great, and you have to go to like the DTR, then you're probably going to be a little bit more aggressive about a quarterback in this year or next year's draft. Either way, you would be looking for a quarterback. There would be some small things that would happen. So like Joe Bitonio, either he retires or you move on because he's not going to fit your timeline anymore. Same thing with a lot of the expensive pieces on the offensive line. So Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin, you would probably move on from those three because they're not going to fit your timeline anymore. Amari Cooper wouldn't fit your timeline. Sedarius Smith wouldn't fit your timeline. But guys like Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, those guys will fit your timeline, right? JOK, Grant Delpit, most of the guys that you re-signed. So you would keep the core of talent that's here that's still like under 30. You would just move on from the 33-year-old plus guys or the 32-year-old plus guys on the roster because you're thinking you're going to be down for a year or two. And by the time you get to year 3 of that, of the quarterback rebuild, then some of those guys just ain't going to make sense anymore. So I think that's going to be what they do. I would think of it more as a reload than a rebuild because they have a lot of structure built here. They would just have to try to find a solution at the quarterback position. And if Jameis plays good football, then you can kind of reload and rebuild at the same time while also having good quarterback play, while also winning games at that same time. So there's a lot of ways it could shake out. And I think that's what the Browns would hope would happen. The next one is from Cool Guy. It says, hypothetical, if Watson keeps playing bad and everything is true and so on and so forth, do you think the Browns bail out on the season, tank for a quarterback, or do you think they look at their quarterback room who could lead the Browns to a Super Bowl? I had a very funny conversation with JP Acosta about this, and we were talking, and he expressed to me that he felt like the only way the Browns could tank is if Deshaun Watson started the whole season and he looked like he did in Dallas for the rest of the year. Because you put anybody else in at quarterback and they're not playing at a single-digit QBR level, they're not playing at a bottom-tier EPA per play level, then you're going to be able to win games with this Cleveland Browns team. They're just very talented. So you're not going to be able to like tank and get the number 1 overall pick or something like that unless you have a complete vampire at the quarterback position, just sucking the life out the team, which I don't think would be the case with anybody else on the roster, or you would hope Deshaun Watson doesn't play that bad the rest of the season. So I don't think tanking's really an option for the Cleveland Browns. I think they would just go look at their quarterback room, see what they can get out of him. If they have to move on from Deshaun Watson, they would most certainly do that and see where they land at the end of the season, truthfully. Yofo says this. If DW4 is done here in the next few weeks for good, if this is supposed to be a fastly presented case that hits him, who do you think will end up being the long-term starter given the preparation time? Would Winston be a better break glass in case of emergency if he doesn't get the spot? No, Winston would have to start. I don't think, like DTR, I said it in the preseason, I'll say it again. I would like to wait another year before you seriously try to play DTR. Like, I see no problem with giving him time. I like the development that we saw from preseason to preseason, but there's still some stuff there that I think is going to limit him if he has to play in an actual game. And I don't think it benefits him to play in an actual game at this point of his career. And I don't think it makes sense for him to when you got Jameis Winston right there. So, no, I think it would be Jameis. DTR would be somebody that if it goes bad with Jameis like 8 weeks into it, maybe you go to DTR to see what you got, but you would definitely be hesitant to go to DTR for the rest of the season. Some dude on Twitter says, besides a victory, what are you hoping to see from the Browns that will put fans' minds at ease and get people excited about a season? Do you believe that Browns fans are as Browns fan like as they would have been historically, or am I just thinking too much? Truthfully, I think what Browns fans want to see is an exciting performance from the Browns offense. No matter how it happens, that would make you feel better. You want to feel like this is a Browns team that has a functional offense. If you feel like that's the case, you're going to feel a lot better about this team, whether they win or lose going into week 3. But if you get another week where the offense struggles to put up points, despite the resources invested in them, you're going to be very frustrated. So I think offensive explosion is what Browns fans want to see. Obviously, you want to see that defense continue to live to expectations, but offensive explosion is probably going to be the thing that moves the needle the most for a lot of Browns fans because we just have not seen it. Robot Gorilla says the Browns their first game. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much brownsing will they do for the remainder of the season? Depends on what they do week 2, right? Like if they play well week 2, then I don't think they're going to be doing very much brownsing, right? But if they let week 1 spiral into week 2 and they look embarrassing out there again, then who knows, man? Because it doesn't feel like they trust themselves at that point. But as far as right now, I mean, they didn't do much brownsing last year, so I would trust them to not do the same this year. Should the Browns stop spreading out the offense or just start running power, Kevin's offense again? Our defense is man heavy, asking them to run all game while the offense. Yeah, I don't think the issues last week had much to do about the philosophy offensively. Like the play calling wasn't great, the blocking wasn't great, but really it was at the quarterback position where a lot of things kind of like funneled into nothing. So I just think this is about where your quarterback's head is and if he's in a mental place to play football right now, to be honest with you. How much of an impact will Njoku's injuries have? It will have a little bit of an impact. Now, the Browns fortunately have an Njoku injury during the stretch where you feel like they can win these games even without David Njoku. Now, Jacksonville will probably be the toughest one, but you play the Commanders, you play the Giants. You feel like you should be able to beat those both without David Njoku. So it will have an impact. It will make things a little bit more difficult for Deshaun Watson or whoever's playing quarterback because you're not going to have that safety blanket of just dumping it off to David Njoku there. You're going to have to move the ball downfield, and it's going to put more pressure on the wide receivers. So it's going to have an impact, but it's an impact you would hope that this offense can overcome given, the investment that the Browns have put into it. But that's going to be it for this week's Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.